We are used to looking at this place from the outside, almost never beneath it. On an open plain in southern England, a ring of stones has stood long enough to become familiar, even predictable. Visitors walk its perimeter. Cameras frame the same angles. The monument appears complete, self-contained, offering everything it has to show above ground. The official understanding is steady and uncontroversial. Stonehenge is a prehistoric ceremonial site, constructed in stages over many centuries. Its stones were shaped, transported, and arranged with care. Archaeologists describe it as a place of ritual, seasonal gathering, and symbolic order, remarkable for its engineering but limited to what can be seen and carefully excavated. The ground beneath, according to tradition, holds little more than post holes, shallow pits, and the traces expected of ancient construction. That version has been taught for generations, not because it is dramatic, but because it is consistent. Yet in early field notes from the 20th century, written before modern survey tools, before crowds and preservation rules, there is a small, easily missed observation. One excavation log mentions persistent resistance encountered several meters below the surface, not stone blocks or rubble, but broad subsurface anomalies that did not align with known features. The entry is brief. No diagram follows. The dig moved on. That mention did not alter the prevailing interpretation. It did not lead to a separate study or a revised plan. In later summaries, the note is reduced to a footnote, then disappears entirely. Publications return to what could be safely confirmed: stones above, shallow features below, nothing that required deeper attention. No one argued that the observation was wrong. It was simply left where it lay, unexpanded. Standing there today, the surface feels resolved. The stones mark their circle. The grass grows evenly. The story appears finished. But if early excavators met something they did not pursue, and if that encounter quietly slipped out of the record, then the monument may be more complete than it appears. The question is not whether the familiar explanation is false. It is whether it was ever meant to look deeper. The shift did not begin with a question. It began as a routine upgrade in how the ground was measured. In the early 21st century, researchers returned to the landscape around Stonehenge with tools designed to see without digging: ground-penetrating radar, magnetometry, electrical resistivity surveys. The stated goal was modest: refine maps of the surrounding plain, understand soil movement, improve preservation planning. What appeared on the screens was not expected to change the monument's story. It was meant to fill gaps, not open them. The first irregularities were recorded calmly: broad linear forms beneath the surface, curving outlines where uniform chalk should have been, areas where signals behaved as if space had once been hollowed, then carefully closed. These were not single points, but patterns, extending beyond the stone circle and beneath it, at depths deeper than known construction cuts. Individually, none of this was extraordinary. Archaeological landscapes are layered, disturbances accumulate, but some measurements resisted easy categorization. The dimensions were too regular to be natural. The alignment did not match drainage features. Several anomalies formed arcs that echoed the monument above, but on a scale that suggested planning rather than coincidence. A few details unsettled the standard model. Some structures appeared far larger than anything required to support standing stones. Others extended into zones previously assumed untouched. In certain areas, the depth exceeded what would be expected for pits or post holes associated with ritual timber phases. The shapes implied volume, not just marking. Then came the coincidences. The subsurface outlines respected the same cardinal orientations used by the stones above. Their spacing mirrored surface features that were thought symbolic, not structural. Preliminary dating of disturbed soils suggested phases that did not sit neatly within the accepted construction timeline. No single finding demanded revision. Together they introduced friction. Researchers responded cautiously. Reports used careful language. Potential features, uncertain origin, requires further verification. Some datasets were flagged as incomplete due to soil conditions. Others were set aside pending cross-analysis. The discoveries were framed as interesting but peripheral, background complexity in an already complex site. What emerged was not a contradiction, but a discomfort. The traditional narrative was clean, efficient, and visible. The new data was not. It implied effort beneath the surface that served no obvious ceremonial purpose, at least none previously described. The story still held. Officially, nothing had changed. But the ground now appeared busier than expected. Worked, shaped, and organized in ways that did not seek attention. And once seen, it was difficult to unsee the imbalance. A monument explained almost entirely by what rises above the earth, resting on data below that no longer looked incidental. After the initial surveys, the conversation did not stop, but it changed. Public updates became narrower. Papers focused on methodology rather than implications. Conference panels summarized results without returning to the deeper anomalies. Nothing was retracted, yet certain lines of inquiry were no longer advanced. The data existed, but the way it was spoken about grew careful, almost restrained, as if precision itself now required distance. Outside formal reports, different tones appeared. In later interviews, a few researchers acknowledged briefly that some findings were hard to contextualize. One mentioned areas where further probing was not encouraged due to conservation priorities. Another referred to sections of raw data that remained unpublished, not because they were flawed, but because they raised questions beyond the scope of the project. These comments did not challenge the official framework. They sat beside it, quietly. There were also studies that began and then faded. Pilot excavations proposed near specific subsurface contours were postponed, then quietly removed from schedules. Supplementary materials cited in early drafts never appeared online. References to deeper features were replaced with general language about landscape complexity. The explanation, when given, was procedural. Limited funding, shifting research goals, the need for preservation over intrusion. From this silence, several logical interpretations emerged, never formally endorsed, never dismissed. One theory suggests the underground features represent large-scale structural preparation, foundational systems designed to stabilize the monument in unstable chalk. The scale would explain the depth and organization. It never gained traction because it implied an engineering sophistication that complicated existing models of labor and intent. Another proposes ceremonial use not above ground but below, processional spaces, controlled access zones or chambers meant to be sealed. Comparable practices existed elsewhere in prehistoric Europe. The idea stalled because no open voids remain, only traces of absence. A third interpretation is more administrative than mystical, that the subsurface complexity reflects multiple phases of use that overlapped, were reworked, and intentionally obscured, making any single explanation insufficient. It offers no revelation, only disorder, and that makes it hard to present. Beneath the surface, the site grows quieter and more deliberate. Survey maps show layered interventions, access zones narrow, certain depths remain untouched by modern tools. Work continues, but selectively, often without announcement. The place is managed with care, yet also with limits. If the unanswered questions persist, not because they are forbidden, but because they resist clean framing, then the story has not ended. It has simply reached a point where speaking less feels safer than explaining more. What followed was not an ending, but a recalibration. Research at the site did not stop. It narrowed. Language shifted toward conservation, monitoring, long-term stewardship. Access protocols were revised. Certain survey zones were reclassified as complete, even when questions remained attached to them. The work continued, but its center of gravity moved away from what lay deepest below the stones. No announcement marked the change. It appeared gradually in documentation, revised objectives, smaller excavation windows, emphasis on non-invasive methods. The ground was still measured, but less was asked of it. Interpretation became cautious, almost minimalist, as if restraint itself were a professional responsibility. Several elements were never resolved. The full extent of the subsurface contours remains undefined. Some alignments detected in early scans were not re-examined at higher resolution. Discrepancies between soil disturbance layers and accepted construction phases were noted, then left open-ended. There is still no agreed explanation for why certain features mirror the geometry above without serving an obvious structural role. Years later, a quiet addition complicated the picture. During a separate environmental survey, one dataset, circulated only among specialists, confirmed a broad zone of altered ground directly beneath the central area. It was not hollow, it was not voided, it was shaped. The finding required no revision of the official interpretation, and so it did not receive one. It existed alongside the accepted story, unresolved. Today, Stonehenge is described with confidence, a ritual monument a marvel of prehistoric coordination, a place whose meaning is visible in stone and sky. That description is not wrong. It is simply complete only on the surface. What remains unexplained is why so much effort appears to have gone into what could not be seen, and why the deeper record grows quieter the closer one looks. The unanswered elements are not dramatic. They are technical, measured, and persistent. Perhaps the difficulty lies not in what was discovered, but in how little appetite there is to pursue what refuses to clarify itself. Some histories do not end with a conclusion. They stabilize into silence, waiting not for proof, but for the willingness to listen longer than is comfortable.